Hello, today we will recap a 2022 war action film, in which young soldiers experienced the horrors of World War I firsthand. Before we start, please subscribe to our channel for free because we'll upload new videos regularly. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and enjoy. The movie takes place during World War I in 1917. We see a German soldier named Heinrich who is given orders by his commander to join the war. As he's about to climb up a ladder, he witnesses a fellow German soldier getting killed right in front of him. Heinrich, along with other soldiers, fights against the enemy forces. He soon runs out of bullets and has to fight the enemies using a shovel. In the next scene, there is a large pile of bodies, including the soldier we saw a few seconds ago. After the soldiers are killed, the people responsible for cleaning collect their uniforms, including Heinrich's. The uniforms are then cleaned and given to new recruits. In North Germany, a young boy named Paul goes to a building to be recruited into the Imperial German Army. He is joined by his school friends Albert, Franz, and Ludwig. The soldiers are motivated by an officer's emotional and inspiring speech. The patriotic speech fills them with pride, and they are eager to apply their newfound confidence in battle. When Paul gets his uniform, he's surprised to find the name Heinrich printed on the shirt instead of his own. Paul and his friends put on their uniforms and share a laugh. They continue their journey to the Western Front in northern France, full of determination. They are halted by a staff surgeon who requisitions their vehicle for medical purposes. As a result, they are forced to continue their march on foot. Along the way, a bomb explodes near the line of soldiers, and they fear it may contain mustard gas, so they quickly put on their gas masks. Paul notices that Albert is having difficulty with his mask, so he steps in to help him. The lieutenant is annoyed that Paul prioritized helping his friends with their gas masks before putting on his own. The officer believes that Paul won't survive for long on the battlefield. As the young soldiers settle into life in the trenches, Paul encounters a man named Kat who shares some water with him. Kat cautions Paul that the situation will become even more challenging during the night. Meanwhile, Ludwig, one of Paul's friends, expresses his disappointment, as he had envisioned a different experience when he joined the army. Later that night, while Paul and his friend Albert are on guard duty in the trenches, a bullet hits Paul's helmet, but he survives the shot. Soon, the soldiers are subjected to heavy bombardment, and they are instructed to evacuate and seek shelter in a bunker. During the chaos, Ludwig becomes fearful and voices his desire to go back home. Another soldier tries to sneak out of the trench, but he is killed by an exploding bomb. As the shelling persists, the bunker starts to collapse. Everyone else manages to escape except for Paul and one other soldier. The following day, Paul is discovered buried under the rubble of the collapsed bunker but miraculously still alive. Kat offers him some food, and as part of their grim tasks, Paul is ordered to collect identification tags from the bodies of fallen soldiers. While carrying out this painful duty, Paul accidentally steps on Ludwig's eyeglasses, and he comes to the heartbreaking realization that Ludwig has been killed. After 18 months, a group of military officials are compiling the names of the fallen soldiers at the German High Command. Among them, a man named Mr. Herzberg receives the list of these names. The list reveals that over 40,000 men have lost their lives on the battlefield in recent weeks. Consequently, there is a growing hope among the soldiers that the high-ranking military leadership will finally decide to bring an end to the war and stop the ongoing bloodshed. Mr. Herzberg walks into the room with all the generals, while the story shifts back to the soldiers in France. Paul and his newfound friend Kat manage to pilfer some food from a nearby farm. Back at their base, Paul, Kat, Franz, Albert, and another soldier named Jaden gather to enjoy the goose. Later, as the boys are busy peeling potatoes, 3 French girls walk by. Albert appears interested in approaching them, but it's Franz who seizes the opportunity and approaches the girls. He ultimately leaves with them. Franz returns to the base late at night and regales his friends with stories about the French woman he spent the night with. He proudly shows them a piece of cloth he took from her as a memento of his adventure. The next day, Paul and his friends are tasked with a mission to find a company of 60 new recruits who have gone missing. Upon reaching a train station, they realize that mustard gas has been unleashed in the area. They take refuge inside a shed, and Paul eventually finds the missing recruits in a room. Tragically, all the recruits had died. It becomes evident that they removed their gas masks prematurely, resulting in their deaths due to the poison gas. General Friedrich is seen in his office, smoking a cigarette and talking to one of his men about a ceasefire treaty with the French. But Friedrich is too proud to consider ending the war. He strongly favors a more aggressive approach and insists that the military should keep fighting. He is not ready to surrender just yet. Mr. Herzberg is shown on a train, and it's revealed that the meeting between the French and German powers to end the war will occur on this train. Paul's team receives orders to return to the front lines. They head to the battlefield and take cover in the trenches. Paul and his team manage to reach the French trench, where they engage in combat and take the French soldiers by surprise. They capture the French camp and enjoy the food left behind. Their celebration is interrupted when they feel the ground shaking. To their astonishment, the French counterattack team arrives with tanks, presenting a formidable threat. In their attempt to fight back the French counterattack with tanks, Paul and his team discover that their rifles and machine guns are no match for the sophisticated weaponry of the French forces. Although they manage to destroy one tank with an explosive, the group realizes that the French are advancing with flamethrowers. Faced with this terrifying threat, the team flees, but Albert is injured and unable to escape. He pleads for his life as he kneels down in surrender, but to their shock, the French soldiers execute Albert. Paul, who narrowly survived a blast earlier, is deeply disturbed by the execution of his friend. Devastated by the death of his friend Albert and unable to locate Franz, Paul finds himself in a state of despair. During an aerial attack, he falls into a puddle, and a wounded French soldier lands nearby. In a moment of panic, Paul stabs the French soldier, but the soldier does not die immediately. Paul witnesses the man's suffering as he slowly loses consciousness, and he begins to feel deep remorse. Paul tries to help the soldier, but it's too late, and the soldier passes away. In a last attempt to honor the soldier, Paul searches for the man's personal documents and comes across a photograph of the soldier's wife and child. While reflecting on the soldier's death, Paul makes a solemn promise to find and inform the soldier's wife and child about his passing once the war is over. Mr. Herzberg receives some positive news as well. It's finally agreed that an armistice will be in effect on November 11th at 11 a.m. On the other hand, General Friedrich is not pleased with the developments. He discreetly calls the new recruits to report to him without disclosing his intentions to the others. When Paul returns to the base, he finds his comrades engaged in a celebration, rejoicing as they learn that the war is finally ending. Jaden is discovered in a field hospital with a gunshot wound to his leg. He clutches the piece of cloth from the French woman that Franz was involved with when he died on the battlefield. Paul and Kat are reunited, and Paul informs Kat about Jaden's situation. They decide to bring some food to their wounded comrade. While they are eating, Jaden, overwhelmed by the circumstances, stabs himself in the neck with a fork. Later that night, Paul experiences a moment of panic, expressing doubt about ever escaping the trenches. Kat comforts him, reminding him to be grateful for their survival. In the early morning, Kat and Paul return to the farm where they had previously stolen a goose. This time, it's Paul who sneaks into the farm. He intends to take some eggs but soon discovers that the farmer's son has caught him. Paul attempts to reassure the boy and keep him calm, but the young boy locks Paul inside the barn and rushes to alert his father about the intruder. Paul manages to break free from the barn and escapes with the stolen eggs. The farmer's son watches them closely and decides to go after Kat. He follows Kat with a shotgun in hand, and without warning, he fires a shot. Paul is startled by the sound of the gunshot. Paul discovers Kat is struggling to walk, and when he examines his friend, he realizes that Kat has been shot in the stomach. Despite his intentions to remove the bullet, Kat insists that the medics will handle it. As they make their way to the hospital, 2 trucks filled with soldiers pass by, but none of them stop to assist. Eventually, they reach the hospital where a medic examines Kat's wound, but it's already too late. The bullet has damaged Kat's liver, leading to a fatal infection that claims his life. Paul is left in shock after losing his last friend in such a senseless incident, and it happens just hours before the war comes to an end. The soldiers are once again assembled in front of General Friedrichs. Even though it's clear that Germany has lost the war, Friedrich's pride prevents him from accepting defeat. He delivers a speech and commands the soldiers to go back to the trenches and continue fighting until the 11th hour arrives. But some soldiers refuse to follow this order. They just want to return home to their families and are promptly arrested by the guards. As the clock approaches 11, some French soldiers are waiting in the trenches. When the German soldiers enter no man's land, one of them checks his clock and notices there are still 15 minutes until 11. Suddenly, one of the French soldiers hears the approaching Germans and realizes they are about to be attacked. He orders the others to prepare for defense. Paul, filled with a mix of fearlessness and despair, returns to the battlefield and begins to kill as many French soldiers as he can. In the midst of the chaos, a French soldier grabs Paul and pushes his face into the mud, attempting to suffocate him. Paul finds himself in a fierce fight with a French soldier. They both struggle to survive in a dark and tight underground space. Sadly, another French soldier sneaks up on Paul and stabs him in the heart. The needles strike 11 seconds after receiving the fatal blow, and the war is over. Paul desperately tries to leave the underground bunker and see the daylight one last time. Later, a German general instructs a soldier to gather the identification tags from the soldiers who lost their lives. The soldier finds Paul's body resting in the trench, and he also notices Franz's blood-stained scarf in Paul's hands. He takes the scarf and wraps it around his own neck, and the movie ends here. So that's for today. Please subscribe to our channel if you like this video, which is the most important way to support us in making more great videos like this.